The sun hung low over the sprawling cityscape, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. In the heart of this urban labyrinth, a man named Elias wandered aimlessly, his mind clouded with thoughts of insignificance and routine. He was an ordinary human in every sense. Average height, unremarkable features, and a life that seemed to blend into the monotony of modern existence. Yet, something about today felt different, as though the universe had tilted ever so slightly on its axis. Elias had always been drawn to the peculiarities of life, the small mysteries that others overlooked. As a child, he would spend hours staring at the stars, imagining worlds beyond comprehension. Now, as an adult, that curiosity lingered, albeit buried beneath layers of responsibility and the relentless march of time. But today, as he strolled through the crowded avenues, his senses sharpened inexplicably. The air seemed charged, electric, as if it carried whispers from another realm. It was during one of these moments of heightened awareness that Elias noticed her, or rather, it. Standing inconspicuously near a street vendor's cart, the figure exuded an otherworldly presence. Its form was humanoid, yet subtly alien, with skin that shimmered faintly under the fading sunlight. The being's eyes were large and luminous, reflecting hues of violet and gold, and its movements possessed an ethereal grace that defied human anatomy. Despite its strangeness, no one around seemed to notice. They passed by without a second glance, their attention consumed by phones, conversations, or the endless rush of daily life. Elias froze, his breath catching in his throat. For a fleeting moment, he wondered if he was hallucinating, but the clarity of the vision dispelled any doubt. The being turned its head slowly, locking gazes with him. Time seemed to dilate, the cacophony of the city fading into a distant hum. There was no fear in its expression, only an intensity that pierced through Elias's very soul. It extended a delicate hand toward him, holding what appeared to be a small, crystalline object. The artifact pulsed softly with an inner light, casting prismatic patterns onto the pavement. Without thinking, Elias stepped forward, his feet moving of their own accord. The crowd parted around him like water flowing around a stone, oblivious to the exchange unfolding before them. When he reached the being, it placed the crystal gently into his palm. The touch sent a jolt through his body, a sensation both exhilarating and unsettling. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, the being inclined its head slightly, as if acknowledging some unspoken understanding, before turning and disappearing into the throng of people. Elias stood there, clutching the crystal, his heart pounding wildly. He glanced around, half expecting someone to point and shout, to demand an explanation for what had just transpired. But the world continued as if nothing unusual had occurred. Only the weight of the object in his hand, and the lingering echo of those luminous eyes, confirmed that it wasn't a figment of his imagination. As Elias walked home that evening, the crystal nestled securely in his pocket. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life had irrevocably changed. The artifact seemed to hum faintly against his leg with each step, a constant reminder of the encounter. His apartment, once a sanctuary of familiarity, now felt stifling and foreign. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the overhead light, seemed imbued with newfound significance. He placed the crystal on his kitchen counter, studying it under the harsh fluorescent glow. Its surface was smooth and cool to the touch, yet it radiated an energy that made his fingertips tingle. Tiny fractures within the crystal refracted the light into a kaleidoscope of colors, creating patterns that danced across the walls. Unable to resist, Elias began researching. He scoured the internet for anything resembling the artifact or accounts of similar encounters, but the results were frustratingly vague. Conspiracy theories, blurry photographs, and speculative fiction filled his screen, offering little substance. Yet, amidst the noise, he stumbled upon an obscure forum dedicated to extraterrestrial phenomena. One thread caught his eye, a user claiming to have seen a being matching the description of the one Elias had encountered. The post described the entity as a Harbinger, a title steeped in myth and mystery. According to the thread, Harbingers were said to appear only to those deemed worthy, bestowing gifts that could alter destinies, or unravel them entirely. The more Elias read, the more his unease grew. The crystal, once a source of wonder, now loomed over him like an unanswered question. What did it mean to be chosen? And why him? These thoughts gnawed at him as he drifted off to sleep, the artifact resting inches from his pillow. That night, His dreams were vivid and surreal. He found himself standing in an endless void, surrounded by shifting constellations that pulsed with life. A voice, neither male nor female, resonated in his mind, speaking in a language he didn't understand yet somehow comprehended. It spoke of balance, of sacrifice, and of a gift that carried both promise and peril. Elias woke with a start, drenched in sweat, the echoes of the dream lingering like smoke. The crystal sat on his nightstand, glowing faintly, as if responding to his agitation. Over the following days, Elias became increasingly obsessed. He took the artifact everywhere, carrying it in a small satchel slung across his chest. At work, he found himself distracted, his thoughts drifting back to the crystal and the cryptic messages from his dream. His colleagues noticed the change, commenting on his distracted demeanor, but Elias brushed them off with vague excuses. Evenings were spent poring over ancient texts borrowed from the library, searching for any mention of harbingers or similar entities. He devoured myths from cultures across the globe, piecing together fragments of lore that hinted at beings who bridged the gap between worlds. One evening, while flipping through a dusty tome on Mesopotamian legends, Elias paused at an illustration that made his blood run cold. It depicted a radiant figure offering a glowing orb to a kneeling human. Beneath the image, a caption read, "The gift of the starborn, a blessing or a curse." The accompanying text described how recipients of such gifts were often thrust into roles they never sought, tasked with responsibilities far beyond mortal comprehension. Some became heroes, revered by their people. Others succumbed to madness, unable to bear the weight of their newfound purpose. Elias slammed the book shut, his hands trembling. Was this his fate? To be a pawn in some cosmic game he barely understood? Despite his growing anxiety, Elias couldn't bring himself to part with the crystal. It had become a part of him, an extension of his very being. He began noticing subtle changes in his surroundings, patterns in the clouds that formed impossible shapes, whispers in the wind that sounded almost like words. Once, while walking through the park, he swore he saw the trees sway in unison, their branches spelling out symbols he didn't recognize. Each occurrence left him more unsettled, yet also more determined to uncover the truth. His obsession reached a tipping point when he decided to visit Dr. Miriam Lang, a renowned anthropologist specializing in prehistoric artifacts. Though hesitant to reveal the full extent of his discovery, Elias hoped she might provide insight into the crystal's origins. Sitting across from her in her cluttered office, he carefully unwrapped the artifact and placed it on her desk. Her reaction was immediate and startling. She gasped, her eyes widening as she leaned closer, her fingers hovering just above the crystal as if afraid to touch it. This shouldn't exist," she murmured, her voice tinged with awe and disbelief. "The craftsmanship, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. Where did you find this?" Elias hesitated, unsure how much to divulge. "It was given to me," he said finally, choosing his words carefully. "By someone not from here." Dr. Lang studied him intently, her brow furrowed. "You realize how extraordinary that sounds, don't you?" "I know," Elias replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "But I need answers. Please, tell me what you can." She sighed, running a hand through her graying hair. "If what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying I believe you, then this object could be incredibly significant. It might even be alive, in a sense. Some ancient cultures believed certain artifacts contained fragments of consciousness, remnants of beings far older than humanity. If that's the case," she trailed off, her gaze returning to the crystal. "If that's the case, then accepting it means you've accepted a role you may not fully understand." Her words sent a chill down Elias's spine. "What kind of role?" "That's the problem," she said softly. "No one knows. These stories are shrouded in ambiguity, designed to inspire fear and reverence. But one thing is clear, whatever path you're on now, there's no turning back." Elias left her office feeling heavier than when he'd arrived. The weight of the crystal seemed to press against his chest, its presence both comforting and suffocating. As he navigated the dimly lit streets back to his apartment, he couldn't help but wonder if he'd made a grave mistake. The gift, once a beacon of hope and intrigue, now felt like a chain binding him to forces beyond his control. Yet, deep down, a part of him refused to let go. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was something more primal, an instinct telling him that the answers lay not in retreat, but in embracing the unknown. Whatever the reason, Elias resolved to continue seeking the truth, even if it meant confronting dangers he couldn't yet imagine. For better or worse, the crystal had chosen him, and he knew there was no escaping its influence. Elias's days became a blur of research, restless nights, and mounting paranoia. The crystal, now a permanent fixture in his life, seemed to grow warmer with each passing hour, as though it were alive and aware of his growing desperation. He began to notice strange coincidences, patterns in numbers, recurring symbols in advertisements, and fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures in his peripheral vision. At first, he dismissed these occurrences as products of his overactive imagination, but they persisted, gnawing at the edges of his sanity. One evening, while examining the crystal under a magnifying glass, he noticed something he hadn't seen before: tiny, intricate carvings etched into its surface, forming a spiral pattern that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The realization struck him like a thunderclap. It wasn't just an object, it was a key, a cipher waiting to be decoded. Determined to unlock its secrets, Elias delved deeper into cryptography and symbology, teaching himself methods he'd never imagined he'd use. Late into the night, he worked tirelessly, sketching diagrams and cross-referencing ancient scripts. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to decipher fragments of meaning. The symbols told a story, fragmented and cryptic, of a civilization that existed long before humanity's rise. A civilization that had mastered the art of manipulating reality itself. The crystal, he realized, was a fragment of their legacy, a tool designed to bridge dimensions. But the implications terrified him. If he unlocked its full potential, what would it unleash? Would it elevate him to unimaginable heights, or destroy everything he held dear? His breakthrough came unexpectedly. While experimenting with ultraviolet light, he discovered that the crystal emitted faint pulses when exposed to specific wavelengths. These pulses corresponded to coordinates, astronomical positions that pointed to a region of space far beyond Earth's reach. The revelation left him breathless. Could it be a map? A signal? Or something else entirely? The possibilities swirled in his mind, each more daunting than the last. He knew he couldn't do this alone, but whom could he trust? The thought of confiding in anyone filled him with dread. The world wasn't ready for something like this, and neither was he. As the days stretched into weeks, Elias's isolation deepened. He stopped attending social gatherings, canceled plans with friends, and avoided phone calls. His co-workers noticed the dark circles under his eyes and the way he flinched at sudden noises, but no one dared ask what was wrong. The crystal consumed him, its pull irresistible. He began experiencing vivid hallucinations, visions of vast, alien landscapes bathed in hues no human eye should see. In these dreams, he stood among towering structures that hummed with energy, their surfaces alive with shifting patterns. Beings of light and shadow moved around him, their forms fluid and indistinct. They spoke in tones that resonated through his very bones, their words incomprehensible yet strangely familiar. Each time he awoke, the visions lingered, leaving him disoriented and questioning the boundary between reality and illusion. The breaking point came one stormy night. Lightning illuminated his apartment in flashes of blinding white, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Elias sat at his desk, the crystal glowing faintly in the darkness. He had been trying to replicate the UV experiment, but something was different this time. The pulses were stronger, more erratic, and the air around him crackled with static electricity. Suddenly, the room plunged into silence. The storm outside ceased, the rain halting mid-fall as if frozen in time. Elias's breath caught in his throat as the crystal levitated from the table, spinning slowly in midair. Its light intensified, bathing the room in an otherworldly glow. Shadows coalesced into shapes, forming figures that loomed over him. Their eyes burned with an intelligence that transcended human understanding, and their presence filled the space with an oppressive weight. "You have taken the gift," one of the figures intoned, its voice reverberating through the room. "Do you understand what it means?" Elias tried to speak, but his voice failed him. The figure leaned closer, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. "It means you are bound. Bound to a purpose greater than yourself. Greater than your species." "What purpose?" Elias managed to croak, his voice trembling. "To restore balance," the figure replied. its tone unreadable. To mend what has been broken. But beware, for the path ahead is fraught with peril. Many have faltered, consumed by the weight of their task. Before Elias could respond, the vision dissolved, leaving him gasping for air. The crystal fell back onto the table with a soft clink, its light dimming until it was once again inert. Shaken to his core, Elias collapsed into his chair, his mind racing. What had he gotten himself into? The weight of the unknown pressed down on him, heavier than ever before. Yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, a spark of resolve ignited within him. He didn't fully understand what was expected of him, but one thing was clear: he couldn't turn away now. The crystal had chosen him, and whether it was a blessing or a curse, he would see it through to the end. In the days that followed, Elias began to piece together fragments of the alien queen's intentions. The visions grew more frequent, each one revealing snippets of a grand design that spanned galaxies and epochs. Through these glimpses, he learned of a cosmic imbalance threatening the fabric of existence itself. Entire star systems teetered on the brink of collapse, their energies destabilized by forces beyond mortal comprehension. The alien queen, a guardian of sorts, had entrusted him with the crystal as a catalyst for restoration. But the cost of wielding such power remained shrouded in mystery. Elias's connection to the crystal deepened, and with it came abilities that defied logic. He found himself able to manipulate matter on a molecular level, reshaping objects with a mere thought. Doors unlocked at his approach, electronic devices responded to his will, and wounds healed unnaturally fast. Yet, these powers came at a price. Each use drained him, leaving him physically and emotionally exhausted. Worse still, the more he relied on the crystal, the more it seemed to reshape his perception of reality. Colors appeared sharper, sounds more distinct, and emotions more intense. It was as though the world had been stripped of its veil, exposing truths too profound for the human mind to fully grasp. The transformations weren't limited to his physical self. Elias began to feel a strange kinship with the alien queen, as if her essence had seeped into his very being. He dreamed of her often, standing atop a crystalline throne in a realm of perpetual twilight. Her voice echoed in his mind, guiding him, urging him to embrace his newfound role. "You are more than human now," she whispered during one such vision. "You are a conduit, a bridge between worlds. Trust in the gift, and it will show you the way." But trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered. The more Elias tapped into the crystal's power, the more he questioned its true nature. Was it truly a gift, or a test designed to break him? The line between ally and adversary blurred, leaving him adrift in a sea of doubt. He sought solace in Dr. Lang, sharing fragments of his experiences in veiled terms. She listened intently, her expression a mixture of fascination and concern. "There's a fine line between enlightenment and madness," she warned him one afternoon. "Whatever this thing is doing to you, it's changing you in ways you can't undo. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Elias nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "I don't think I have a choice anymore. This isn't just about me, it's bigger than that." Dr. Lang sighed, her gaze fixed on the crystal sitting between them. "Then tread carefully. Power like this doesn't come without consequences. You're playing with forces that could rewrite the rules of existence." Her words haunted him long after their meeting ended. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Elias felt the crystal pulse faintly against his chest. It was calling to him, beckoning him to delve deeper. Against his better judgment, he obeyed. The room dissolved into darkness, and he found himself standing in a vast, desolate plain. The sky above churned with storms of multicolored lightning, illuminating ruins that stretched endlessly in every direction. In the distance, the alien queen awaited him, her form shimmering like liquid starlight. "You've come far," she said, her voice resonating like a chorus of bells. "But the journey is far from over. The imbalance grows stronger, and time is slipping away. What do you want from me?" Elias asked, his voice steadier than he expected. "To act," she replied simply. "To wield the gift as it was meant to be wielded. But know this, the choices you make will ripple across dimensions. Lives will be saved, and lives will be lost. The burden of decision rests solely on your shoulders." Elias clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. Why me? Why not someone stronger, smarter, more capable? Because strength and capability are irrelevant, she countered. It is your humanity that makes you unique. Your capacity for empathy, for sacrifice, for hope, even in the face of despair. These are the qualities that will determine the outcome. Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring emotions he had long suppressed. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that he might actually succeed, that he might rise to the challenge and fulfill the role thrust upon him. But the thought was fleeting, overshadowed by the enormity of the task ahead. As the vision faded and he returned to the waking world, Elias knew one thing for certain. The battle for balance had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. Elias awoke with a start, his body drenched in sweat despite the chill in the air. The alien queen's words lingered in his mind like an echo that refused to fade. Her final declaration, that his humanity was his greatest asset, felt both empowering and maddeningly vague. What did it mean to wield empathy as a weapon? How could hope counteract forces capable of unraveling entire galaxies? These questions gnawed at him as he sat up, rubbing his temples. The crystal lay on the nightstand beside him, its faint glow pulsing rhythmically, almost as if it were breathing. He reached for it hesitantly, half expecting another vision or surge of energy. Instead, the artifact remained inert, its surface cool to the touch. Yet Elias couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting. For what, he didn't know. Perhaps it sensed his hesitation, his internal struggle between fear and resolve. Whatever the case, he knew one thing. Standing still was no longer an option. The imbalance the Queen had spoken of wasn't some distant threat. It was already here, creeping into the fabric of reality like cracks spreading across glass. Determined to take action, Elias began assembling tools, both physical and intellectual, to better understand the scope of the problem. He scoured scientific journals, ancient manuscripts, and even obscure online forums dedicated to fringe theories about interdimensional phenomena. Each source offered fragments of insight, but nothing cohesive enough to form a clear plan. It was during one such late-night research session that he stumbled upon a concept that sent chills down his spine: quantum resonance. According to certain speculative physicists, quantum resonance described how specific frequencies could align particles across vast distances, creating bridges between otherwise disconnected systems. Could this be the mechanism behind the crystal's power? If so, then perhaps the imbalance the Queen referred to was a disruption in these resonant frequencies, a cosmic dissonance threatening to tear apart the delicate web holding existence together. The idea electrified him, but also terrified him. If the crystal operated on principles beyond human science, how could he possibly harness its abilities without causing further damage? And yet, there was no turning back now. Every instinct screamed at him to move forward, even if blind faith was all he had to guide him. His first attempt to manipulate the crystal's energy came on a moonless night, when the city outside his apartment fell eerily silent. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, Elias held the artifact in both hands, focusing intently on the spiral carvings etched into its surface. He recalled the coordinates he'd uncovered earlier, the ones pointing to a distant region of space, and willed himself to connect with them. At first, nothing happened. His frustration mounted, and just as he was about to give up, the crystal flared to life. A beam of light shot upward, piercing the ceiling and bathing the room in radiant hues. The air vibrated with a low hum, and Elias felt a strange pull, as though gravity itself had shifted. Suddenly, images flooded his mind, stars collapsing into black holes, planets consumed by fire, civilizations reduced to ash. These weren't mere visions. They were warnings. The imbalance wasn't confined to a single location or dimension. It was everywhere, spreading like a disease. But amidst the chaos, he glimpsed something else, a faint thread of stability, a nexus point where the fractures could be repaired. The image crystallized into coordinates, different from the ones he'd seen before. This time, they pointed not outward to the stars, but inward, to Earth itself. Gasping, Elias broke the connection, the light fading as quickly as it had appeared. His heart raced as he scribbled the new coordinates onto a scrap of paper. They corresponded to a remote desert region thousands of miles away, a place marked only by barren sands and ancient ruins. Was this the site of the imbalance? Or was it a trap designed to lure him into danger? Either way, he knew he had to investigate. The journey to the desert proved grueling. Armed with little more than supplies, the crystal, and a GPS device loaded with the mysterious coordinates, Elias drove for hours under the scorching sun. The landscape grew increasingly desolate, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. When he finally arrived at the designated location, he found himself standing before a massive stone structure partially buried in sand. Its architecture bore no resemblance to anything human-made. The walls were smooth and seamless, adorned with symbols that glowed faintly in the sunlight. As Elias approached, the crystal in his pocket began to pulse violently, its energy resonating with the structure. He placed it against one of the glowing symbols, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. A hidden doorway slid open, revealing a dark passageway leading downward. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside, the air growing colder with each step. The walls were lined with the same intricate carvings he'd seen in his visions, their patterns shifting and rearranging as though alive. At the end of the passage, he entered a cavernous chamber illuminated by an ethereal blue light emanating from a crystalline pedestal at its center. Suspended above the pedestal was a swirling orb of energy, crackling with chaotic bursts of color. Elias immediately recognized it as the source of the imbalance, the epicenter of the cosmic fracture. The alien queen's voice echoed in his mind once more. To restore balance, you must become the bridge. Summoning every ounce of courage, Elias approached the pedestal. As he drew closer, the orb reacted violently, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Pain shot through his body as the crystal in his hand fused with the energy field, binding him to the process. Visions assaulted him again, this time not of destruction, but of creation. He saw worlds forming from stardust, life emerging from primordial oceans, civilizations rising and falling in endless cycles. Through it all, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, urging him to act. With trembling hands, Elias reached out and touched the orb. Instantly, a torrent of energy surged through him, overwhelming his senses. He screamed as memories, not his own, flooded his consciousness. The alien queen's sacrifices, her struggles to maintain harmony, her desperate hope that someone would carry the torch after her. Tears streamed down his face as he realized the true cost of the gift she had given him. It wasn't just power, it was a legacy, a burden passed down through eons. And then, clarity struck. The imbalance wasn't merely a physical phenomenon. It was a reflection of something deeper, a fracture in the collective will of sentient beings across the cosmos. To heal it, Elias would have to channel not just the crystal's energy, but his own humanity. Drawing on every emotion he'd ever felt, love, loss, joy, sorrow, he poured himself into the orb, willing it to stabilize. The chaos subsided gradually, the colors blending into a harmonious spectrum. The chamber filled with warmth, and for the first time since this ordeal began, Elias felt peace. But the peace was fleeting. As the energy settled, a new presence emerged, a shadowy figure cloaked in darkness. Its voice slithered into Elias's mind, cold and venomous. You think you've won? You've merely delayed the inevitable. Balance is an illusion, a fragile construct doomed to collapse. And when it does, I will be there to reshape what remains. Before Elias could respond, the figure vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Exhausted but resolute, Elias staggered out of the chamber, the crystal now dimmed and dormant in his hand. He didn't know who, or what, the shadowy figure was, but he understood one thing clearly. The battle for balance was far from over. As he emerged into the blinding sunlight, Elias gazed at the horizon, knowing that whatever trials lay ahead, he would face them, not because he was chosen, but because he chose to rise. Elias stood in the desert, the weight of his journey settling over him like a second skin. The crystal, now silent, felt more like a companion than a tool, a reminder of the sacrifices made and the battles yet to come. He knew the shadowy figure's words were a promise of future conflict, but they also fueled his resolve. Balance, he realized, was not a static state. It was a constant effort, a dance between chaos and harmony. As he drove away from the ruins, the landscape seemed less desolate, as if the world itself had exhaled. Humanity's flaws and strengths would always shape the cosmos, and Elias embraced his role in that intricate tapestry. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, he carried hope, not as a shield, but as a weapon. For the first time, he truly understood the alien queen's faith in him. The gift wasn't just power, it was trust. And trust, he vowed, was something he would never betray. Whatever came next, Elias was ready.